You're listening to the Forest School podcast with Lewis Ames and Gemma Southerden.
I can talk as long as you want.
And then if I'm talking as well, I'm still slightly louder, even though...
Well, you are shouting, that's why.
Well, that's because I was trying to replicate how I sound when I'm animated.
Okay, and excited.
I don't believe...
What?
That's my animated voice.
What?
Is it Basil Fawlty? I don't believe... No. Victor Meldrew.
Yes, One Foot in the Grave, man. I was taught by Mrs. Meldrew's ex-husband.
Sorry, you were taught...
That's a fascinating fact, isn't it?
Miss...
You know Mrs. Meldrew? She was kind of Scottish.
Right.
Annette Crosby, I think her name is.
Right.
Yeah. And her ex-husband was one of my teachers at drama school, and their daughter is now... I think I'm right in saying, is now an actor that you would recognise, or Rachel someone. Anyway, he's a very nice man.
Not to one-up it, but I'm going to.
Yeah.
I'm going to, mate.
Yeah.
My teacher at university, my music teacher, was taught by someone who 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 was Beethoven. I am 6 teachers away. And obviously my university lecturer was like, and now you, students, are 7 teachers.
Yeah. I've impregnated you with Beethoven.
Fucking Beethoven.
Amazing. Wow.
Which is obviously where I get all of my talent from. Wild mood swings.
I was going to say special needs. Okay, I go. Special needs. Yeah, what are we talking about? No, first of all, check in. How are you doing?
How am I doing? I'm doing pretty good considering... We have just gone into, in the UK, our second like full lockdown, third kind of national... Anyway,
looking back on it, lockdown 2 just didn't count, did it? It was like a...
This is a proper stay at home. The schools have been closed. The second time the schools have been closed, which I think is poignant.
Yes.
I kind of am just at a point of, it's like it's all behind glass. I don't mean emotionally, I just mean I'm kind of riding it and just kind of going like, oh, okay, cool. Yeah. This will happen, but maybe that's... I mean, and I catch myself and I go, God, what an unbelievable privilege that we are secure enough in so many ways, or at least I am and my family is, that a national lockdown can happen. I can go, this is an inconvenience, but by no means is this life-threatening. And I think that's worth kind of lots of us remembering that, like, there are significant parts of the world where... You know, before any lockdowns happened, people were struggling, and it's only going to get worse. Are we a bit bored? Yes. Are we a bit frustrated? Maybe. But on the scope of this, sorry, if you were going to say you were not feeling great, I've just poo-pooed over all of those feelings that you might have had. I've just invalidated everything you might have.
No, not at all. No, I feel the same as you in terms of. When you look at like day-to-day life in our family, not really that much has changed, to be honest, except that someone will go, can we do this? No. Can we do this? No. Can we go here? Can we see these people? No. That's changed, but not much else has really. But yeah, same as you really. The thing that makes me the most sad is thinking about how... it's a double-edged sword, isn't it? It's like thinking about how COVID affects other people and thinking about how lockdown affects other people, and both of those are horrendous for lots of people.
Well,
and that's the sad thing.
Posit a thing that I think has made us more resilient, and possibly has made your family more resilient as well, is I've spoken to a significant number of families who have said to me that this lockdown feels harder because it's January, it's shortly after the winter solstice here, it's cold. It's not as appealing as the last lockdown we had in this country was it started in April, but really it went on till kind of June-ish time.
Yeah, it started in March, didn't it? It was so hot.
You could sit in the garden. You could kind of be like, you know, they were going, oh, there's too many people in the park, but really you could still go outside. And I sort of feel like that's been taken away from me less because we're winterised as people.
Yeah.
My family are a bit more like, okay, we were going to go outside anyway.
Yeah.
We're going to go outside in January for multiple days a week in the weather. Yeah. So, whereas for some people, they only want to go outside when it's lovely.
Yeah, because they're not used to it. And that's completely fine to not be used to it. Why would you, go and spend ages outside when it is -2? Because it has been like -2 for days on end here now, hasn't it? So that's all very well if it's like snowing and it's super fun. But if it's just like grey, windy and -2 and you've got young kids, like that is really challenging unless you've
But it's
had
one
to
of
have done it.
But it's one of the
time
positives
previously.
of forest school, isn't it? Is that like anybody who's done forest school for more than a couple of years will be resilient to grey British winters.
It's just normalised, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's normalised.
So I hope that is something that lots of our listeners and lots of forest school people can kind of take with them and kind of go, oh, actually, do you know what? I do feel pretty winter. You maybe have the right boots. Maybe you do have a good coat that means you can still get out, go for a walk.
Yeah.
Maybe not see people, that's social stuff, but...
And the outlook as well, because I was like reading something where some parents were kind of going, oh God, like, you know, it's worse this time as well because we've had the experience of trying to homeschool our kids using the school sent resources, and it was terrible last time. We've got that memory of it being terrible and that memory of our relationships being really strained, and so we're like doing it again with all of those memories, you know, stacked against us already. And then somebody saying, oh, my child's going to find it really hard because to be sat down for that long, because at school they get to like run around the school field every hour. And I sort of read it and I was like, that's really interesting that you're pointing that out. Like, unless there's something that means that you can't do that, like your child is expected to be in a Google Classroom all the time, why can't you get up and like run around outside? Like, maybe they don't have a garden, maybe they live in a flat, maybe that's why. Yeah. But I just thought that was an interesting kind of like, well, obviously we can't do that. But why? And maybe that is because your outlook isn't, it's normal to go outside and run around in January, because why would you?
Yeah. Well, that kind of neatly brings me on. I wanted to talk about an article that I shared in our Facebook group and had a couple of interesting comments with. You haven't read it or seen it, so I'll do my best to describe it, but I would encourage you and the people listening to go and have a look at this article. So there is a teacher in, I cannot remember what state, but somewhere in America. She is doing, her rationale is to address the gender divide in STEM subjects.
Yep.
In her, I think I'm right in saying preschool class, but it's definitely close to early years.
Yep.
She read and found that the boys were playing with Legos and that increased their STEM aptitude, mathematics, spatial reasoning, all these things. She then bought pink and purple Legos to try and encourage the girls into the STEM area, into these things.
Yeah.
Oh my, if you think that's the controversial bit, strap in. She has now, in this article, publicly said she does not allow the boys to play with the Lego.
Wow.
She only lets the girls play with it.
Yeah.
And she said, when the boys ask me if they can play with it, I always tell them, you can have your turn in a bit. And in my head, I'm thinking, yeah, when pigs fly.
Whoa.
So she believes she is doing something to address the gender divide in these subject areas. But I thought it was really interesting. We talked about gender things a few times on this podcast, and I kind of read it as just a really interesting example of, is that readdressing it? Is that
What's
discrimination?
her reasoning for? I can imagine where she's coming from. In terms of making it like a girl-friendly zone by making it a girls-only zone. I can understand that if you kind of ride with that and go, well, our kids are conditioned in this way anyhow, so let's ride with it and try and use it to our advantage. But has she got any reasoning for why she doesn't go, there's 2 packs of Lego, this is the boys' Lego over here, this is the girls' Lego over here, and the boys aren't allowed in this zone?
It's a very small article.
Yeah.
Doesn't go into much depth. But no, all she has is a girls-only after-school Lego club. So in the day,
after-school club.
No.
Oh.
In her daily provision, only the girls are allowed to play.
Yeah.
She also has an after-school club, which is only open to girls. Right. So in the day, the boys can see the Lego, and if they ask to play, she says, yes, the girls are playing with it right now.
That's so twisted.
She also has an after-school club, which is girls only. That's my understanding.
That's so twisted.
I just find it very interesting as an idea, and I commented on the discussion we were having, and I said one of the things that I think is going on in my brain is that she is a part of the group that she is trying to promote as a teacher who's identified as female. She's promoting the female kind of group.
Yeah, but to the detriment of the male.
Yeah.
And that's the sticking point, isn't it? It's like, if you're doing something for what you think is a good reason, is it hurting other people? Well, yes, it is.
Well, is it that equality, equity?
Yeah, but you can't gain equality by shoving somebody else down. That's not the way it works, in my opinion.
Mm.
And and that kind of reminds me of the TERFs, man, the TERFs, who are like, we cannot allow trans men to use, trans women to use female toilets, for example, because men are going to use those toilets and like sexually assault real women who are going to be using those toilets. It's like that kind of sort of, we protect our rights by shitting on the potential rights of a marginalised group. Like, well, I guess you wouldn't necessarily call the boys in that class a marginalised group, but yeah, interesting. I mean, interesting that she cares enough to like experiment, but I would say that if a boy is asking to play with a Lego and you're saying no, you're not allowed to, like, that is surely not really allowed. Like, how is that even legal?
What I thought was interesting was it said that she was prepared to defend it and talk to parents about it. She was like, I think it said she's expecting complaints or something, or she was prepared for it. But what I didn't see in the article was any mention of a leadership team or any sort of like, is this just in her room? Has this been like a top-down, the school says we need to readdress this? Like, almost not like what army has she got behind her, but like what authority has she got? Because I think that's very different if a school says we're going to address girls in STEM by doing this across a school, or if one teacher says, I'm going to do it in my classroom. And
also, is she doing it just as a thing? Like, is she doing a proper research study? So is she actually going to...
Doesn't sound like it.
Because if you were doing a thesis or something and you were doing it as part of some social science, then you would need to do the ethical investigation about that and then get permission from parents.
But then how different is this to... So we've read Vivian Gussent-Paley's books, where she does, I would say, maybe not as controversial, but she is not doing like, here's my thesis, here's the academic research. She just goes, I'm going to implement this in my classroom, I'm going to see what the effect is, and I'm going to write a book.
I don't know, that's interesting actually. I wonder if she did get kind of consent from parents. She must have done. I don't think you can kind of do some research in your classroom and write a book on it, even if you're anonymising the names. Like, it would be good practice to inform the parents that you were doing that, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
And to say, we are trying this methodology. And also, I don't think any of her methods exclude anybody. Like, that's the opposite of what she's trying to do, isn't it?
Yeah. I just thought it was an interesting... When you said it's not an academic thing, I was like, well, that's how Vivian's books are written, aren't they? As like, I tried this, and it falls into that soft science thing. But I'd be interested to hear what other people think. There's so little in the article that almost lends itself to a very open-ended discussion about these, how you implement stuff like this.
So would our equivalent be like, okay, the boys are not allowed to split wood with the axes, only the girls are allowed to do it.
I guess so, yeah.
That would be interesting. I mean, there are interesting moments. I think there's like loads more to talk about with gender in the forest, isn't there? And
absolutely.
There are interesting moments that I find with some of our kids where the boys will sometimes say to the girls, "Oh, would you like me to do that for you? Oh, would you like me to help you with that?" And they're being genuine, but like as in genuinely helpful, trying to be. But of course, with that offer comes loads of assumptions about, because you couldn't possibly manage that.
And then that gets internalised by the person receiving it, going, you are perceiving that I'm not doing well at this.
Exactly.
So then that gets internalised.
Okay.
Anyway.
I know. And then I find myself like intervening in terms, like, and then speaking for the girl sometimes and going, it's all right, actually. I think, she's fine. And I'm like, is it my place to do that? Because then I'm speaking for her, and therefore am I kind of undercutting any power that she has at all?
Well, it kind of... Okay, so this is drifted, but I think this is relevant. So you and I were looking at a certain qualification recently that we've since decided we're not going to go for, because it was a qualification that you had to get individually. You couldn't get as a group. You had to get one or the other. And one of the reasons that I was talking to the person that organises that, and I was saying, we've kind of paused we won't be doing that. And I said, I'm happy to give feedback if you want. And they said, yeah. And they said, well, one of the things about that was that they would only certify a person, not a group. So it would be, I could be certified, or you could be certified, or we both could be certified. Financially, we couldn't both be certified because it just didn't make sense for us. And when I was writing the feedback up, I wrote that one of their stipulations was that we had to then, in all public things, we had to write, this person is qualified in this, and this person is assisting, or this person is not. And I said, one of the things that we've tried really hard to do in our business relationship is to have internally and externally, I think we're trying to make it so there's no hierarchy.
Yeah.
Which we try and do on a gender basis. We try and do on a, when we talk to the parents, when we decision make, when we do all those things. And when I was giving this feedback, I went, I don't know that it would be a good business decision, not for we wouldn't get the customers, but for for our working relationship, to have it perceived, even if we went, well, I'll do it, but we know it's both of us kind of thing, to have it perceived from the outside that one of us is higher than the other.
Because it already is perceived in that way. The amount of times I have to, slightly with a bit of a, I don't know what the word is.
Cheeky grin.
No, pugnacious, that's the word.
Oh, okay.
With a pugnacious attitude as somebody goes, you help out at that forest school up the road, or, you work at Lewis's forest school, or, there's already that assumption so many times, and I have to go, actually, blah, blah, and so that would only compound that, wouldn't it? And it definitely is a gender thing, because there's nothing I've given them to give them that clue.
No.
I mean, they don't know anything more.
No,
than
and as it becomes, I think there was a time at the start where I had been doing this for 6 months, 9 months on my own.
Yeah.
And so I can kind of understand at the beginning, but as we go on, the more and more I'm like, but that was just me farting around on my own. That's awful. You shouldn't look at that stuff.
And they don't know that either. People who are talking to me about it.
No.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah. Interesting.
Find out about CPD courses at childrenoftheforest.com. Check out the podcast links for more details.
So, we are sat in our woods. That's a little quote in my family from my father-in-law's speech at our wedding.
Yeah.
He tried to summarise that kind of our wedding wasn't what he would have deemed traditional.
Yeah.
Wasn't, church. It wasn't a church, but then we went to a marquee, and I think in his head it was still that kind of 70s, 80s thing of you go to the hotel and the hotel puts the food on or whatever. But he opened his speech, he just took a really long pause and he just looked it down and he just went, "We are in a tent." And it was an incredible, it summarised everything, but in our family now, anytime, you just go, "We are in a tent.
We are in a tent.
We are in a tent. We are in our woods."
God knows why. We are.
My daughter is marrying this absolute scruff bag. Anyway, that's not what we're talking about. I have made a wood chip road in our woods on my own. It took me fucking ages, and I am really tired.
It's good though. It's really good.
Thanks.
It's really good. Lots of wood chip. It's all looking very smart. But that may also be because no kids have been here since you've done it.
Well, they're not coming back, are they? I assume this was it now.
The road must not be walked on.
No. This is just my private kind of garden
Parkland
outside my house now.
Yeah.
That's what I'm going to do. Well, I think that's one of those things, isn't it? Like we said, whenever your site gets a pause, sometimes it's the right thing to do to just pause and go, so one of the good things about lockdown last year was that we just stopped coming to the site in March and April. Mm-hmm. And the site went, it is spring, I am going to go hell for leather, and just had a lovely kind of, I'm going to say blossom, but I mean blossom growing season. It was great.
I listened to a thing yesterday that said that, in lockdown 1, we were all like, oh my gosh, the effect of lockdown on nature has been amazing.
Oh, yeah, all the planes got grounded, all the stuff, yeah.
I listened to a thing yesterday that said that actually is probably bollocks. It was probably exactly the same. It's just that we had slowed down to a point where we could notice it. So I do wonder whether that was the case here, that in our heads we were like, oh, because no groups have been here, like more stuff has grown. And actually it's not just about like how you're feeling when you visit it, it's that you have been living at a slower pace for a very long time, so your brain has slowed down.
Maybe
your ability to observe things, because you're not thinking about like, oh, what am I doing later, I've got to meet up with that person, I've got to do such and such. You've just got an empty blank slate of brain, and then you're like, oh look.
I suppose visiting more infrequently as well, because you come back and lots of things changed rather coming in every day.
Yeah, and it was saying about the planes grounded and the traffic not being there meant that it was quieter, so we were able to observe more bird song. So it wasn't more bird song, we could just hear it better and things like that.
Well, that's still a positive, isn't it?
Yeah.
That sounds like a real downer. Like, it wasn't more birds.
Yeah.
You just listened.
Rubbish.
But one of the things that we wanted to talk about was, so if you have a pause over winter, it can be quite a good time to improve a site, because it's not a time where you go, well, I'll just step back and the woods will kind of regenerate itself. I mean, it will to an extent, but it's a good time, I think, to go, okay,
Take some stock,
let's prep some firewood, let's get some stuff ready.
And in the UK we are allowed to go out and do daily exercise, aren't we?
Yeah.
And travel. I don't think there's like a mile restriction
Just
that I've seen.
Please don't go outside of your town, village,
local area. Yeah. But
this is part of our work. This is, and
you
know, I can't spread wood chip from home.
Yeah.
It's just not far enough.
And it is a good time in lockdown as well to be able to have the brain space to really notice things. So you noticed, didn't you, about like swings that have been tied up on a tree for ages, and you're like, that tree doesn't look too happy actually. You can take the swings down and put loads of wood chip over its roots. And I'm looking around, because you've noticed that and told me, I'm now looking at a lot of the ropes tied to the trees and going, that looks like it's getting a little bit embedded. Like, what can we do about that? And things that you just take for granted when you're working with groups, because you're just all about what's happening now. And the fact that we don't have groups in as well, so you're able to kind of try and prioritise a bit more easily, because you're not kind of going, oh, okay, I don't have time to do all of this stuff.
It feels to me like I'm doing less. So when we're running and the wheels are turning, I feel like quite a lot of what I'm doing is like slapping plasters on stuff, going, right, that's a bit muddy, get some wood chip on that little area, or get something, because making this wood chip path from where we park our cars, I've made a wood chip path all the way to the main camp, which is probably only 100 metres, 200 metres, but has taken me about 10 hours, if not more, and a considerable amount of energy, and, you know, stuff that I wouldn't have done if I was like, oh, I'm going, you know, I'm going to be back in here in like 12 hours because we're going to run another group tomorrow. What do I want to do? Do I want to spend another hour here, or do I want to go home and actually rest and recharge?
I think there's a difference as well when groups are in again. I personally go, oh, let's save that, because the kids will really enjoy doing that as well. Let's save that.
Yeah, you can lie to yourself like that if you want. I know,
exactly. Oh, it'll be really worthwhile for the kids to help out, so I won't do that now. And actually, there's a lot of benefit in just going, actually, the kids aren't part of this right now. This is about our relationship with the woods as custodians, and it's not about giving the kids an experience or involving them. It's actually about getting some real work done, because, let's face it,
and a bit
it takes a long time.
I mean, you could look at it that way. Another way I've realised that I was looking at it was just modelling. That when they come back and they see, oh crikey, you guys have made the path, or you've taken all of that down, and it will spark conversations of like, why isn't that swing there? Oh well, I noticed this, and stuff that their interest, attention span, energy levels won't take 18 hours of wood chipping, right? I mean, some of them it will. Some of them they would chip for weeks, but it's more of a way of going, sort of sparking that conversation of going, well, part of being here is I want to have a relationship with these trees. They can't move, so we've got to look after them. They give us firewood, they give us all these things. So we wanted to talk about different kind of ways that we winterize our site. Not winterize ourselves, because we've done that, in a different episode about, I think we kind of talked about that, about burnout episode. I feel like it came into there. But so wood chipping is one of the main ways I think we look after the woods. And because I'm just going to answer a question that is all over Facebook every winter. Muddy paths, we've got muddy paths. We've got muddy paths. What do you do about muddy paths?
Yeah.
And the options range from like pontoons. Have you seen those? When people make them out of pallets and you kind of skip, but they get muddy, and then you go, well, why don't you cover them with chicken wire?
Yeah.
And then you go, oh, that
breaks
rust,
and sharp.
and it just becomes a bit of a faff.
So what, Christmas trees?
It's all about Christmas
Snedding
trees.
Christmas trees.
So what we have hit upon is, in the winter, just after Christmas, you're not going to get this in enough time, I'm afraid. Everybody will have already... You might be able to find somewhere. Yeah. But what we do is sned. So snedding is taking all the branches off Christmas trees and lay them down like a mat, and then cover it with wood chip. And what that mat does is, when you step on a muddy path, the reason your foot sinks is because all that energy, that weight, is going into just the size of your footprint. But putting down the Christmas trees and then the wood chip, so your foot would still go through wood chip, but putting the Christmas trees down like a mat sort of disperses the energy of footfall over a wider area, and means that the impact is more like hitting it with a big rubber mallet rather than driving nails in.
Yeah. People do say, like, where do you get wood chip from? And it took us a while to find a reliable source, didn't it? And it's one of those questions that comes up on Facebook quite a lot. And lots of people go, oh, use Highline, or use these, like, massive firms of tree surgeons that do work for the electrical...
Yeah, highways maintenance.
Yeah,
and
all of that stuff. And go, oh, they'll give it to you for free when they're in your area. And I've put us on the waiting list for that, 2 years ago, and we've never had a call from them. But instead we have a relationship with our local tree surgeon, so he comes and does the tree surgery that needs doing in the woods, and we buy wood chip from him. And it started out as like a bit of a freebie, and then especially as our site got muddier and it's harder for him to deliver and he gets stuck in the mud and all that kind of thing, so we do pay for it. But we get a good deal because we've got a good relationship with him, and we put work his way and he gives us a discount on wood chip. So I would heartily recommend getting a relationship going with somebody local to you who knows what they're doing about trees. And
as much, someone local to you is basically always going to be local to you, and that means that there is a demand locally for, wood tree surgeons, which means there's going to be a supply of wood chip. One of the issues I've heard from other people, and the few times, because somebody that used to work here does work for Highline, and so we did get some wood chip from them a few times. But the way that Highline work is that they'll go and do this section of the motorway. So for 2 months, let's say, they would offer you 300 tons of wood chip, and then they'll disappear for 2 years because that's no longer the highway's priority. And the guy that used to work here with us he worked here, within, and his chainsawing work was within an hour of here, and then the next 6 months he had to rent a flat in Wales because that was where the jobs were. So it moves so much that it's better to find someone local, I think, and go, okay, let's just get this circle going. It's the equivalent of shop local, isn't it? Yeah. And I regret not doing it more earlier on, because we've had some larch trees that have died around main camp, and you'll never necessarily know why that is. They haven't got larch dieback, have they? No. But I just worry that it is because they're like the compaction of the soil, because they're around. Like, it's a bit of a coincidence that they're around main camp, and that perhaps if we had a regular supply of wood chip back in the day and started doing that, because soil erosion is something that you don't notice until you suddenly go, oh, look at that. Yeah, definitely. And I think it is, and there's also that we're here all the time, so we notice these trees are, dead more. I'm sure there are other larches in our woodland that are standing deadwood, but because we're not there, we sit here, 40 hours a week because we work a full-time job, because we're great. We're here not that much. But it's that thing, isn't it? It's like you only observe what you're familiar with, let's say. Yeah. But it does lead on to, so you were talking about ropes, and actually swings are something that I'm yet to find a solution for having permanent swings that isn't, you just have to put wood chip underneath every 2 months, because with all the kind of culture building of like, hey guys, this is how we look after the woods and this is how we use the swing, children will scuff their feet to slow down. That's naturally what we do. You're not going to get children that go, no, we swing until we come to a natural stop and then we put our feet down. What I did find worked quite well was clay.
Yeah,
and
that
then
worked
wood
well,
chip.
didn't it?
The clay. So we have, because we're in Devon, clay is everywhere. So it's not a commodity that we didn't have to buy it. We just got it out of the ground. It's confusing, isn't it? We got it out of the ground to protect the ground.
Put it on the ground. Yeah, just shifted it
yeah.
a bit.
But that seemed to be hard wearing enough that it meant that I could top it up with wood chip every now and again. Whereas just general soil was eroding so fast. And the other option, I suppose, is people who are on like a permanent site is to move swings, to move camps.
Yeah.
Not something we're particularly privileged enough to have on our site.
It's very slopey.
It's very slopey. And also it's very close. So we're on the border between... Our site is sort of half plantation and half old woodland. But the plantation has kind of spilled over and grown through the old wood bit. And I would say, other than where we are, there's very few spaces that you could have a main camp.
Yeah.
We can't have another camp 200 metres over that way or down the hill or whatever, because you'd have to cut so many trees out to clear a space that we just have to go, okay, we preserve this site more rather than let it go fallow.
I imagine if we even had the ability to do that, the emotional upheaval of having to do that, the more time you've invested in making the fire pit really nice, like you've built some great benches, you've got the parachute to go up in exactly the right place, and even if you could move, you'd be like, oh, I really don't want to. But if it means that trees don't die, then it's worth doing.
I think the advantages that you could have, and I've talked to some people that do have rotating sites or have summer camps and winter camps, is that you can set them up to be winter specific. So one of the things that we have is like, our site is very winter specific because we're on a hill, we're northwest facing, so we go, right, we've got to shelter in from the wind. In the summer, sometimes I look at stuff and I'm like, why is it so closed in? Why is it so kind of bulked down? And then it gets to, October and you go, oh yeah, that's why. So I guess one of the advantages would be a very open summer camp and then a very sort of cozy winter camp. But I mean, the other thing that I think has been very useful in terms of winterising is, so let's get storytelling here. Right now, guys, the Holly King is in full swing. The Oak King is right now a tiny baby, is been reborn, but the Holly King is mostly what you can see. And by that I mean almost everything deciduous has gone down. It's just holly sticking up. And it's a really good time to take stock of the visual impact that you're having on the... I think, to be able to go, when in the summer, you have green light coming in from everywhere and everything's very bushy and you can sort of get carried away with everything. And I think when it gets stripped back, I suddenly see the things a bit more and kind of go, ooh, okay. I think
in terms of like that looking very man-made, there's too much man-made.
There's a lot of stuff going on, and it leads me into that reflection of how much are we playing with the nature and with the environment, and how much have we built so many swings or so many tree houses or dens that have become semi-permanent that you go, this is a playground now. And it's only when all the when the holly kind of is the only thing left that you go, actually there's a lot of straight lines maybe, or there's a lot of stuff that needs kind of, a bit like the Oak King, it needs breaking down so that we can rebirth it. Rebirth it when the kids come back.
It's very stark, isn't it? And you noticed that a shelter we built was visible from quite some distance away and needed camouflaging, didn't you? You don't want to cut that bit out.
No, it's fine.
A temporary structure. It's a very temporary structure, but it's just a bit white. So
we'd used a white sort of see-through tarp. And as I was driving in, again, because our site is at the top of a hill, I could just see a big square rectangle. And I thought, not in any like, oh, we're going to get in trouble, or oh, people will see it. I just thought, that doesn't look
Not really
nice, does it?
yeah.
If I live near here, and if I looked up and I could see in a woods a very square white building, it's not a building, a square white tarp, I might go, oh, that sort of spoils my idyllic Devon view.
Completely.
So again, it's just a case of kind of taking stock and kind of... And the other thing is that it's the right time of year. One of the things I would recommend people do, and I'm not very good at doing this, I have peaks and troughs of doing it, is when you walk around in the summer, either very discreetly with spray paint or with some sort of ribbon, you mark the stuff that's dead. Because you can't cut it in the summer. It's not good for nesting. It's not good for falling on stuff that's growing. It's probably when your site is the busiest. The trees, if they've got any life left in them, are giving it that last kind of go. But what you need to do is be marking stuff and just, putting a little, fluorescent dot on it, or marking it in some way that when it gets to now, you can walk around and go, okay, that was nearly falling down this summer.
Yeah.
Now's the time to safely take it out, get some firewood prepped.
Yeah, it's also the time for coppicing and dead hedging and hedge laying. I mean, if you have such things on your site, which I wish we did.
Well,
it's so cool.
I'll be honest, I hedge lay a lot of the sycamore. That is how I've decided to tackle the sycamore in our woods, is to kind of let it split and let it... Because it's so resilient that, you can either push a boulder uphill or you can try and go, okay, how does this...
Well, that's coppicing, isn't it?
Yeah.
That's that's the deal. And it's good and it's useful, and you can decide what bits you're going to leave for how long, so you can get different thicknesses of wood for different things.
Yeah. I've recently, this is the first year that I've done it to the height that I've done it, but I bought 30 hazel trees, which I haven't shown you.
Have you put them in yet?
Oh, they're everywhere. They're literally everywhere, but I intentionally dotted them around because it's the right time to do planting, because everything's dormant and it gives it the right time. But I bought them at 90 to 120 centimetres. So they're the size of a kind of 8-year-old, 9-year-old. Because we have some good coppice spots that we've put in. When we came here, when we sort of set up, there wasn't that much coppice. There's coppice stuff on the hedgerow at the bottom, on the hedge bank. But other than that, there's not that much.
It's like very old coppice, isn't it, as well? Like the sweet chestnut.
Big chestnuts and things. So one of the things that I wanted to do is make a middle story so we get a bit more wind break. And the coppice areas that we've made are these kind of, I guess they're kind of the size of like a classroom-ish. And we've just gone, we'll put loads of hazel in there, we'll put loads of willow in there and do whatever. Whereas this time, I intentionally have dotted them all through the woods, planted mostly in pairs to kind of give them a buddy, give them something to grow together with. But hopefully them being a bit bigger has kind of jump-started that process a little bit more. So when they grow, they're hopefully going to be getting on for 2 metres in the next year or so. And that's something that you can only do in the winter, and you could do that with groups, but this is the first. Here's a sneaky tip if you want one. The post hole diggers are, if you can get a second-hand one, under £100, petrol-powered post hole digger, just like a big drill. So I planted those 30 trees all over our 3-acre woodland in about 40 minutes because I just walked a route and just go and then walked the same route again with the trees, going tree, clump. And we've done tree planting with kids before, where you do it by hand. And yes, it's a less invasive procedure because you can move roots, you can dig, you can see how the soil feels. The digger is a bit of a like, just plough through, I will make a hole. So for speed, it was great. But it's that trade-off, isn't it, of like, what do you want out of the experience? Is it a teaching experience? Is it just a thing that they come in and you go, I've planted all these trees so that we can build this together?
Applications for Forest School training are now open at childrenoftheforest.com. Check out the podcast links for more details.
I'm still recording.
Yeah, I just left it here. Do you have a New Year's? Do you do New Year's resolutions?
No.
Personally?
No. Stop doing it. Stop doing it. Stop doing it as a kind of like...
As a resolution, you
As a
went,
resolution.
no more resolutions this year.
Because if you do resolutions right, it implies that you were in some way shit the previous year, and that you're going to, like, new year, new you. Like, why? What was wrong with you before? What was
How long
wrong?
you got?
You know. Kind of implies, oh, you know, I was a bad person and I did some bad stuff. Like, that's not healthy. That's not a good way to start anything, is it? It's like, yeah, it's the same.
It's too long. 12 months. I can't do anything over 12 months. I genuinely can't. And, you know, if I quite like quarterly targets or 6 weeks targets. You know, I think that's the way my brain works, is still in teaching, like, half terms and terms and, like, doing whatever. But, and also, you can dig in for motivation a bit more over 12 weeks or 6 weeks than you can over, like, 12 months is so long to give yourself like a pass fail, to go like, I will, because quite often they're like fitness or they're like body based, aren't they? Because you've just eaten your body weight in
diet
food.
Culture based, and it's also like, I don't know what I was going to say now. It's like, yeah, I mean, I can't do any kind of target, basically. If you weren't doing it already, it probably means, like, this is my viewpoint.
Yeah.
You may feel differently because you may be more target driven, but I kind of feel like if it wasn't something you were doing already, then it's probably not worth doing or possible doing.
My feeling is always that the skill is in getting back on the wagon, not in sitting on the wagon for the longest time and then falling off and then going, oh, I did 3 months, that was great. It's like, so my thought is always like, well, if you want to do a thing, start it. If that's Tuesday, start it on Tuesday. Yeah. Don't go, I'll wait till Monday so it's a clean week. I'll wait, because that's your brain going, I want all the endorphins and dopamine of, like, having set a target and being lovely, but if I can delay it and maybe some other things will get in, you know.
Yeah.
So I, as much as I say I work in kind of 6 weeks blocks, it starts when I want it to start. It doesn't start because the calendar ticks over, because whatever else. But what I have found very useful is giving myself yearly themes to check in on. They are something I've taken from CGP Grey, who is a very big YouTuber and podcaster and does a great podcast for self-employed people called Cortex, and it's about, like, working and motivation and productivity and all these things, but with like with a focus on kind of how do you mentally trick your brain into doing stuff? How do you set yourself up well to do these things? And they kind of describe it as almost more like a North Star than a pass fail.
Yeah.
So you pick at something that you go, do you know what? How does it relate back to this idea? Am I moving? Because then any progress is progress. So you don't go, oh, I only lost 5 kilos and I wanted to lose 7 for whatever reason you think 7 is the magic number, or, you know, I wanted to read 50 books and I only read 39. If you just go this year of reading, then you can kind of keep checking back in and going, have I done anything today or done anything this week that is moving me forwards towards my year of reading.
It is more lends itself better to the way our brains work, I guess, in terms of, like, spotting patterns. So sometimes it just gives you that nice feeling because it's maybe something you're already doing, but because you've themed it, you look back on it and go, oh, there's a pattern emerging there. There's a pattern of, that also links to that. That also links to that. That links to it in a roundabout way. And kind of makes you feel like there's a theme, even if it's a lot of stuff that you were already doing, but you feel better about it because it kind of connects. And
it gives you a good professional lens to look at business offers that come in or how you're running your groups, to kind of go, not have I got 5 more people to join my toddler group, but going, have I improved, have I, done something towards nature connection, because that's my theme this year. Have I done, and so they go, and then someone says, do you want to lead the maths thing this year? And you reflect back and go, okay, is that moving me in positively in a nature connection, or is that gonna, because everything's a trade-off, isn't there? There's no, you can't just add stuff. That's the other thing with New Year's resolutions, is people go, I will give up absolutely nothing, I will just read more. I will watch these 50 films, I will do whatever. Whereas a theme makes you kind of go, okay, maybe there's something I can drop because that's not moving me towards the theme, and I might pick it up later, or it might not come back.
Only say yes at the moment to things that link with that theme and go, well, everything else can just be on pause for a second. I'm just focusing on this.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's good.
So my theme for... And we've decided that we're going to keep checking in on these on the podcast, partly as an accountability thing, but also as part of our... I think part of having a theme is reflecting on it. So I have also got a journal that I'm going to start reflecting in, because my theme I have the same theme this year for work and for my personal life, which I'm going for gratitude and reciprocity. I couldn't think of a pithy way of putting that together. But I am reading or listening to the book Braiding Sweetgrass, which we're going to talk about in a different episode, but it very much talks about like relationships and gratitude with people, but also with the natural world. And we used to, in our groups, finish with let's say something we're grateful for, and that kind of dropped off because we were focusing on other things. The group dynamic changed. I'd like to bring it back. I'd like to, but adapt how we do it.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's like, how do you set it up? I definitely am down with it as a thing, because all of the benefits of gratitude have been, documented, and it being like the key to happiness. I don't know how they do these studies, but I remember reading about, researchers into happiness, and the only thing that they could definitely pinpoint and go, yes, this makes people happier, is gratitude. It wasn't money, it wasn't any of those like tangible things. It was the ability to feel grateful for things. Which is, if you know that, then you do want to be able to elicit that from your groups, don't you? But how you do it is so important, like interesting.
Well, I think I'm hoping that it will change already reading this book has changed my relationship, I think, with the woodland. I'm not sure whether to go into it or whether we'll dig into this more. I think we'll have lots to talk about when you and I read it. So I'm going to talk about one bit that's in it, which is where this lady is weaving together traditional knowledge and scientific knowledge and spiritual knowledge, and saying that is the braid of these three things. And she's working with some writing students in a university who have all chosen to do, it's like ethno-writing, botanical writing, like it's to do with literacy, but it's also to do with the plant world. And she's saying, on a scale of 1 to 10, how much would you say that you enjoy nature, or you like nature? You love... that's it, it's love. How much you love nature. And they're coming up, high 8s, 9s, some of them saying 10, I love it. And then she's saying, and how much do you think nature loves you? Ooh. And they all kind of are silent, and then they're kind of like, well, they have this view that humans are only ever a detriment to the environment. And that is kind of what we're faced with a lot of the time is, we see the negative sides of human interactions, we see the detriment that we do, the damaging way we farm, the damaging way we use fossil fuels, all these things. So then she reframes it and says, how would it change someone's worldview if they thought that nature loved them?
Oh, wow.
And they talk about these things, and then obviously the students are sparked off, and they go, well, you would have a different, and then she goes, well, how would you know if someone loved you? Well, they would support you, they would give you gifts, they would look after your needs, they would challenge you in some ways that would help you grow. And then she starts to kind of unpick it and go, okay, well, look at what nature, look at the food, the warmth, the materials, all these things of going, actually all of those things you've signified are in there. Why haven't you seen them? How are you not seeing them? And so that led me to kind of go, I want my lens to be of gratitude, of kind of, and the reciprocity bit being that is actually a more sustainable way to do things. So when we saw Jenny, she was talking about the gift tree, the ceremonial tree that they leave things at the end, and that something about that resonated with me.
Same.
And they were saying, and it's this idea that like, so what I was thinking about for our sessions was like, if you've had a great day playing with a certain stick, you've had an absolute war games marathon. If you could find the tree that gave you that stick, or any tree that gave you a stick, and put something there, put some wood chip on it, put some berries next to it, something that kind of then just kind of, it becomes more it's almost like a framework in your brain that goes, oh, I'm looking after the relationship with the tree. But on an ecological thing, that's you restoring some soil, that's you putting some minerals back in, that is actually benefiting the tree. I saw a weird, if you want to see if you want your head to explode, I saw a thing the other day that said, how can you make the argument that trees are not farming people? They keep us alive with oxygen, they give us food, right? They are, through encouraging us to do things, they propagate, we propagate for them. And they're just like, trees are just farming humans. That's all they're doing.
I've never heard that with trees, but I've heard that with wheat. And if you read Sapiens, then he says that, and it just that it completely spun me out and made me feel very depressed. Ugh.
But anyway, so my theme of gratitude, and I want to build this in to my personal life and our professional kind of routines. And so I'm going to be checking in as we do the podcast about how I've been doing, what I've been doing towards that theme, I guess.
Yeah.
Support the podcast today by becoming a Patreon member at childrenoftheforest.com. Check out the podcast links for more details.
That's cool. I have chosen sustainability, which is kind of something that should be happening all the time, and obviously in an ideal world as forest school practitioners we're thinking about that all the time, but I wanted to make it more in the forefront of decisions that I make in terms of ideas that I have, and really focus on that and hold myself accountable, as you were saying.
That's a really good way to sort of, if people are thinking what might my theme be, is think about something that's been in the background that you want to put the spotlight on. Yeah,
and it's something definitely that's of benefit to share with kids, and talk about and explain how it's influencing your decisions. So one example might be the kids going, oh, we really want to buy this resource or whatever. It's like, we could. How could we do that in a sustainable way? Or what impact is that having if we buy that piece of plastic-based stuff or whatever? Researching alternatives, and every time, especially with getting resources or disposing of resources that are broken and things like that, and going, what is the most sustainable way that I can do this rather than the quickest or cheapest? And obviously that's a bit of a privilege, isn't it, to be able to go, well, I could get this cheap version, or I can go pay slightly more and get a sustainable version.
Well, I think that's one of the things that makes a theme better than a similar intention might be people who go, my New Year's resolution is to not buy anything new, but then you've tied yourself into this very difficult position sometimes where you might go, well, the only way I can financially afford this thing that I need is to buy it new, because second-hand ones are more expensive, or they're rarer, or they'll take long, whereas going, is this in our sustainability theme means that you're not breaking anything, we're not failing. If you just go, okay, there'll be other ways that we have moved this towards being more sustainable.
Yeah.
And I think that it's an interesting time, having just had the year that we've had, of sort of fluctuating lockdowns and tiers, and it makes you quite aware, I think, of what you are consuming and what you are taking on board. And particularly, we've just had a very interesting Christmas period in the UK, and we talked to Jenny about kind of going, okay, well, what am I doing? Why do I need all those things? I'd be interested to know what the sales of Christmas homeware were this year. How many people, because for some people they will have gone, my mental health really needs there to be some extra decorations, some a dancing Father Christmas in the corner of every house. That's how I'm going to get through this. And some people will have gone, do you know what? The finances this year mean that's maybe I would have bought them every other year without thinking about it, or just kind of it sounds very silly or very trivial to be like, it's almost like going, what would they have done in the Great Depression?
Well, interestingly, my other theme, which I've just realised this morning is a theme for me kind of personally, but will spill over into forest school, is
year of depression.
No, it's the year of so I'm really interested in social history of the average person rather than the posh rich people. They are the histories that are documented the most, aren't they? The people who've got the time and the money to paint amazing pictures or have their portraits painted. And I'm more interested in like the lost everyday domestic things, and it turns out those kind of things lend themselves really well to forest school because it is going back to nature and crafting and making useful items, for example, with the natural world. So I started making rush lights this week, just for fun. And 3 weeks ago, I didn't know what a rush light was. And read some stuff about like Tudor history and how women and children would spend the evenings making rush lights. So peeling green rushes and getting the pith from the inside, soaking them in fat, and then using them like a very fast burning candle. So it's people who are too poor to even afford very many candles, and that's what you would live by. And you'd spend the summer harvesting the rushes when they're their plumpest, and spend your evenings peeling them, making a massive stash ready for winter and the dark days. And then doing that, and then I was researching them, and I found that actually poor people living in rural areas were using those even in Victorian times, so really quite recently, from 500 years ago up to not that long ago, and things like that, and kind of immersing myself and having a go, because and it also feeds into gratitude as well, because as I was doing it, my other half was watching me doing it. What are you doing? And I explained, and he was like, whoa, we don't know we're born, do we? I was like, yeah, that's really interesting. So it makes you take a step back and go, actually, it wasn't that long ago that we were having to rely on these kind of methods. Jesus, how easy is it now for us to flip a switch?
Grateful. One of the things that I would like to do in our sessions on the gratitude front is to kind of go, as part of our reflection at the end, is to go, what have you been given today? Given by the woods, given by somebody else, given by the weather, something that you can because there'll never be a session. I can't imagine a session where you go, I wasn't given a stick. Or you weren't given a hug. You weren't given a hammock by something. You weren't given a place to hang your hammock by the tree. It's that level of the tree gave you a place to hang your hammock. Yeah,
and also non-physical things, like I was given help by somebody when I had that problem, or I was given a laugh when somebody cheered me up. Or that's really cool. That's a really nice way of phrasing it, actually, because when you say to a bunch of not random adults, because it's usually a group that you've been with for a while, but a group of people who didn't know each other before, and then at the end of the session you go, what made you grateful? That's quite a tough question, but phrasing it that way.
I've been given a lovely seat. This tree has given me somewhere to sit today. Yeah. And just reflecting back on that and going, it doesn't have to be massive things. Yeah. That's hopefully what I'm hoping I will get out of this year of gratitude for me. Yeah. Is I'm hoping that the reciprocity bit comes as a result of being grateful. That in almost a Catholic guilt way, if I notice more things that I'm grateful for, I will feel compelled to give back in a different way. Yeah,
which also brings you joy, so it's like a kind of cycle, isn't it?
Which will then be more sustainable, because I will be knocking on these things and going, right, this tree is actually very important, this log that we're sitting on, so I'm not just going to buy a plastic garden chair and going to,
And to do it in the sustainable way, you'll probably end up doing things that our forefathers and mothers would have done, therefore playing into social history and its relationship with nature.
I had a thought the other day, which related back to something that you have said in the past, and I was like, I want to ask Gemma about this. It's not to do with themes per se. But you and I don't know whether we talked about it on the podcast or whether we've just talked about it in person. But we talked about how there's a lot of pitfalls here, so I'm going to use if you're unsure about a word, imagine I've put air quotes around it. So, you and I have talked before about how home jobs, female jobs...
pink jobs and blue jobs.
Housecraft jobs. Yeah. Right? Air quotes wherever you want that, to make that okay.
Pink jobs and blue jobs came from a vicar that you knew, right?
Yes. It came from... My wife had to do a marriage preparedness course. Anyway.
And he called them pink jobs and blue jobs.
He called them pink jobs and blue jobs. But, so we've talked about how what might be considered pink jobs, especially going back in your social history kind of theme, were things that needed a lot of time in the day, but spaced out. Check the bread, go and check the thing, go and check the thing, go and do 5 minutes of this, go and do 5 minutes, go and put the washing in the thing. Whereas traditionally maybe blue jobs were do this until it's done, cut this tree down until it's done, dig this hole until it's dug, do the thing, you know, so they're kind of...
Yeah, which goes back to the thing of men get flow and women don't get flow.
Yes.
Is that what you're going to say?
No. So what I wondered was whether you could make the, I don't know whether this is a leap, that childcare, traditionally a pink job, does it then follow that childcare is a job that you should check in on sporadically, as is the forest school model of going around helicoptering and going, I just go and see if they're all right, I just go and see...
But that meaning of helicoptering as opposed to helicopter parent in inverted commas, which is that you hover next to your kid all the time going, what are you doing?
Yeah.
What are you doing? What are you doing? Am I improving you in some way? If I'm not, I need to add some value.
That's not the helicoptering I'm talking about. I'm talking about kind of getting a higher look and just checking in on those things, and whether that comes...
And historically, that would have been the way, for sure.
Yeah,
that kids
so you would have
had
gone...
loads of freedom, would have just gone off or been busy doing something, and occasionally you check in with them just to check if anyone's died. Yeah, which is what I fell back on yesterday, and that's why yesterday was a good day at my house, whereas the previous day I'd been like, right, come on, we're doing this, then this, then this, and come on, I'm going to force you through the sausage machine and turn you into sausage.
Wow.
Yes, because I need to, because that's my job, and I will be a failure if I don't do this, and so you have to respect that, so you have to do what I say. You know, one of those days in lockdown, one of those family days, it wasn't even that bad. It was just that I was trying to get them to do some writing. But, you know, whereas yesterday I was like, okay, I'm just going to back the heck away. And I just backed and I backed and I backed and I backed. And then I got on and I was like, this means I actually have some time. And because I'm not a Tudor housewife, I am a 21st century housewife, I was like, I don't actually know what to do because I've done most of the jobs that are not completely boring. I'll just like do some stuff on the computer, and then lo and behold, my two children came. We're bored. What are you doing? Oh, I'm just learning about Japan. We want to learn about Japan. I know. Let's have lunch, sitting on the floor and eat noodles like we did when we were. I was like, oh yes, yeah. And it was
there you go.
The forest school way, as you say, isn't it? It's just like okay, well, if everyone's happy, I'm not going to go and interrupt them and force them to do something else. If everyone's happy and involved in play and in flow, I'll just get on with doing something, and probably someone will be interested in it. I'm going to do something I consider worth doing, whether it is a bit of woodwork or a bit of, looking after the forest or lighting the fire because we need to cook in a bit or whatever, and someone inevitably will go, what are you doing? Oh, can I play?
But it's also a thing that's seen as a detriment by lots of educators, I think, is that people will say, I don't get to spend any sustained amount of time with a group because I'm forever dotting round all the tables in the classroom, or I'm forever teaching that group, then that group, then that group, and actually flipping that on its head and going, well, that's how childcare, how lots of children's learning has been for centuries, has been an adult just dipping in every now and again.
Yeah.
But I would say, before we go, I'd be really interested to hear people's themes.
Yeah.
Either from a you'd like to be held accountable, or not, held accountable sounds very rigid. If you think it would be helpful to go, I'm going to put this in the Facebook group so that people can see what I'm going to do, and then in a month's time or week's time when the next podcast comes out, it's a little reminder to you that goes, oh, have you made anything? Stick them in the Facebook group, or stick them on our Instagram, or wherever you see this. That would be fantastic. And if not, we'll talk to you guys soon.
Cool.
Bye! Bye!
If you like this podcast and want to support more episodes, you can donate through Patreon. Visit patreon.com/Children of the Forest to show your support for the Forest School podcast.